The NBA season is back, man. Preseason has already kicked off. We're watching some of these games over in playback.tv/Lowe's Room. Check us out. Regular season right around the corner. And honestly, I cannot wait. All season was really boring. We're going to keep it a bean with you all. So this is a highly anticipated season coming up. And the only reason why I want to push it back a little bit more, I'm a little concerned about things, is because my team, the Los Angeles Lakers, reside in the Western Conference. And I do believe this is going to be the most competitive, most difficult, toughest conference that we have seen, at least in modern times. I know that is a really big claim, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And I actually believe it's going to be very interesting to see how this Western Conference develops, not just from a competitive standpoint, but also from a talent standpoint as well. The West is chock full of young players that are turning a new leaf that's going to make this conference extremely difficult to make their way through. And again, so much so that I do believe it's going to be the most competitive that we've seen in NBA history. And just in case you don't believe me, trust me when I say I can make very thorough claims that this is going to pan out to be the case. But before I actually go through every single Western Conference teams, please be very mindful that part of the reason why I believe this is because how bad the Eastern Conference is going to be. I made an entire video about this, so check it out. It'll be somewhere on the screen. But yes, I do believe that the success of the Western Conference will be in conjunction with how bad the East is setting up to be this upcoming year. Like, it will be abysmal. This is not to say that there aren't any good teams out East. I think Cleveland and New York are going to have really great seasons. I am really high on some of the other young teams out there as well to have really good seasons and take massive strides, such as Detroit, such as the Magic, and Atlanta. So all that is to be the case. But Boston, Indiana, Milwaukee, not so much. Not only because of injuries, but of course loss of talent in the offseason. And then you have the rest of the conference. It's a big old yikes. Let's just be honest with ourselves. We know the East is going to be bad. So keep that in mind. There's probably going to be a little bit more wins to hand out because how bad the Eastern Conference is going to be. Now, with that being said, let's go through the West, because I don't think people thoroughly understand what exactly we should anticipate. First, top of the conference, OKC. Last year, 68 games in the win column. One of the best defensive teams that we have seen in NBA history. And on top of that, they were a top 3 offense as well, which resulted in one of the best net ratings that we've seen in NBA history also. This was a team that was, genuinely speaking, blowing teams out by a 15-point margin pretty frequently in the early stages of the season. And they were doing that while Hartenstein only played 57 games, Chet only played 32 games, and Alex Caruso only played 54 games. There were stretches where they were literally playing small ball lineups for most of the night, and they were still blowing teams out. So I can only imagine what this team is going to look like if everyone can at bare minimum play 60 games or more. And then add on top of the fact that there will be noticeable improvements with both Chet and J-Dub, and that's something that I think is fair to say we can anticipate that leap in the right direction. So a team that won 68 games last year more than likely is only going to get better. Now, will they push for a 70-win season? Who knows, right? But I do think it's pretty confident to say that 65 is very realistic. Then right underneath them last year, we had the Houston Rockets, a breakout team, young, athletic, defensive-oriented, top 5 on the defensive side of the floor, finished with 52 games in their win column. And they did so, again, off of the back of their defense, and a lot of young players that, very similar to OKC, will continue to mature and improve over this offseason heading into another year. Şengün over in Eurobasket looks amazing. Amin Thompson in preseason also looks really good as well. Fair enough, there are a lot of concerns about what the point guard player is going to look like with Fred VanVleet sidelined for the rest of the season, so there's that. However, I do believe they're probably going to make a mid-season transaction to address that concern, but also, let's just be honest with ourselves, adding KD to a 52-win team is pretty OD. Again, their offense probably isn't going to reach the heights that we thought they were because of lack of point guard play, but it's certainly going to be better than the struggles that they saw last year, where they were hovering around an average offensive team, and that was in large part because how great of an offensive rebounding team this was instead of their ability to put the ball in the basket. Personally, I have this team pegged to be near 60 wins, in large part because I do think they're actually going to go for it, especially because they're going to have to fight for seeding with some other teams and may even convince themselves that they could be close enough to OKC as well. So 60 wins I don't think is that that far off. 55 is very reasonable. And part of the reason why I think they're going to push it is not only because of OKC, but also because of this next team in the Denver Nuggets. Last year, the Nuggets, a 50-win team, but on both sides of the floor, they struggled pretty mightily. Offensively, they were bottlenecked because of their bench being thrashed. Unfortunately, outside of Russ, there was really nobody who was producing. And on the defensive side of the floor, it was also pretty inconsistent to flat out bad. They actually finished bottom 10 in defensive rating last year. And a lot of those things occurred because, again, of bench, but also Aaron Gordon missed a huge portion of the season, only playing 51 games. Now, could that happen again? Sure, Aaron Gordon is getting to that stage of his career where the athleticism may not be there as much as it was in prior seasons, and so that's all very understandable. However, Denver did make a lot of improvements to this roster, bringing back Bruce Brown and then putting Tim Hardaway Jr. on their bench, who will provide more three-point shooting. Hopefully, a healthy season of Aaron Gordon and Jamal Murray can help out Jokic in the offense, because it was certainly bottlenecked even though Jokic was on the roster. And then you have the Cam Johnson addition. He may not be better than MPJ in the regular season, but in post, when Michael Porter Jr. was going into playoff series, being injured, and the shooting was just really up and down, more than likely that will be addressed with the Cam Johnson addition. So even if this team doesn't see a significant improvement in the win-loss column in the regular season and postseason play, I certainly believe there will be a noticeable improvement over what we've seen over the last 2 years, because, you got to start maximizing these years for Jokic, and that was a massive problem with this roster. Now, all of this may not result into a noticeable improvement in the win-loss column. More than likely, they're still going to hover around 50 to 55 games, just because this is an older team that has made a lot of deep postseason runs in recent history. However, I do believe in the playoffs is where we're going to see a significant difference in what this team can output, in contrast to what we've seen in the past 2 playoff runs. So keep that in mind. Then you have this next section of Western Conference teams that are going to win a lot of games, but unfortunately, in the Western Conference, being a 48, 49, 50, or even 51 win ball club might not be enough for you to make the playoffs. That's how scary it is. We got the Clippers, the Lakers, the Timberwolves, the Warriors, and potentially either the Grizzlies or Spurs, depending on the type of leap that we see from Wemby and his health in this upcoming season. Most of these teams I really don't have to explain. LeBron not being available in the beginning of the season is semi-concerning, but I do believe Luka on a competent roster can thrust themselves into a 45 to 51 season almost on a year-to-year basis, especially if the offensive pieces around him can cooperate enough to aid him on that side of the floor. Defensively, not that high on the Lakers, but I think they can offensively operate at a pace of around 50 wins. The Golden State Warriors last year, when Jimmy Butler was on the floor with Draymond and Curry, they were amazing. Almost every single metric points to the fact that this trio will be dominant heading into this upcoming season, and we only saw them for a fraction of the time. Adding Al Horford on his roster will be great, even at his advanced age, because this was a roster that, in my opinion, overly depended on small ball lineups a tad bit too much. The Kuminga conundrum still persists. However, more than likely in the middle of the season, they're probably going to get something in return for Kuminga, so that's going to be great. And then the rest of the roster, more or less, is very similar to what we saw last year. And last year, they won 48 games, where most of the season, Curry was the primary offensive weapon, and his second best player offensively were nights of Kuminga or Andrew Wiggins. This time is Jimmy Butler. So yes, I think the Warriors will comfortably be over a 50-win team this upcoming season. The Clippers more or less kind of speak on their own. A really good solid core of James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, who we hope is going to be available, and Big Zoo, who was sensational last year. The lacking of Norman Powell might hurt them. However, I'm pretty high on John Collins at the power forward position, give you a little bit of height, size, athleticism, while also retaining the floor spacing because he's a three-point shooter. So I think all that is great. DJJ still there as well. Great coaching. Again, I think this is going to be another 50-win team because they won 50 games last year. Kawhi didn't even play the entire season, and they still finished with 50 games. Crazy. The Timberwolves, pretty self-explanatory. Last year, 49 games. Anthony Edwards more than likely will continue to develop, especially as a mid-range operator, hopefully as a decision maker as well. The Timberwolves are pretty self-explanatory. As long as they keep this core together, 50 wins is what they should consistently strive for. And if Anthony Edwards continues to develop like we saw last year with his three-point shot, I think the 50-win threshold should be a layup for them practically every single season. But then we have Memphis and San Antonio. Memphis, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not that high on them heading into this year, not because they're not necessarily talented, but because of the conference that they play in, and they were already heading into a season where they're missing some key players in the rotation early on. That could really hurt you in a very competitive competitive conference like this. But San Antonio is where things get very, very interesting. Maybe I'm higher on Wemby than most, but every single time I see Wemby, all the numbers point to this as well, that he is at bare minimum one of the top 10 players in the league. And this is while the offense was really capped off when they didn't have a competent guard to give him the ball in certain areas. I don't think De'Aaron Fox is the best at this, but he is certainly better than the young guards that they've surrounded Wemby over the past couple of years. The duo of Wemby and Fox, I do believe, will be deadly, and a roster filled with a lot of young, very ambitious players should really thrust them into conversations that maybe some people are not prepared to talk about, but I do believe this is a borderline 50-win team this upcoming season, as long as everyone is healthy and these players are as good as I think that they're going to be. Shout out Stephon Castle and Devin Vassell, because I am expecting them to be a very dynamic duo in the backcourt with De'Aaron Fox, however they want to divvy up these minutes. That is going to be very interesting to see if both of them can operate off ball or be a secondary ball handler decision maker that will make things even easier for Wemby moving forward. And then after that, bro, you have a lot of teams that it could go either way, but even their floor for some of these teams, they're just not that low. Dallas is going to be a very interesting team. Their defense should be out of this world. Pairing Anthony Davis with a bunch of athletic players in the front court will be crazy. I do question the offensive ceiling for this team, because if D'Angelo Russell is your starting point guard, that's a big yikes. Even when Kyrie Irving was going to be available, still very questionable, because you're going to have to rely on him to be a passer and playmaker. Not to say that he can't do it, but to maximize all of those play finishers surrounding him, you're going to have to play at a very elite level. Kyrie doesn't play at that level. D'Angelo Russell certainly doesn't. So there can be a ceiling on what Dallas looks like, in my opinion, but still, I think they should be around a 45, 48 win ball club. Then you have the Pelicans, thrashed with injuries all last year. You're getting back Herb Jones. You're getting back Trey Murphy. You're getting a skinny, in shape, big body, muscle just popping out Zion Williamson, who looks crazy in preseason. Crazy. Also, I know it was hip and it was cool to hate on Jordan Poole, but y'all gotta go back and watch the tape last year when he was in Washington. I'm not saying he's the most mature decision maker, but he gonna make some things happen, trust me, when he's out there playing for the Pelicans. Keep your eye on that. Now, I'm not saying that the Pelicans are going to be a 50-win team. Not saying that at all. I think we've already maxed the threshold of that. But the Pelicans could walk into a near 500 season, if not be at 500, and could still find themselves be like the 11th or 12th seed in the West. I still haven't talked about the Sacramento Kings. I'm pretty high on what I see out of Portland. Not so much that I think they're going to make the playoffs or make any noise, but they're going to be a very interesting team. Last year, they won 36. They built a lot of momentum in the second half of the season with some of their young players improving. Keep an eye out on Portland, just in case you want to just watch some really good hoops from some young players. Really and truly, the only teams that I'm not that high on, Utah, but they're trying to lose, so that's understandable. Phoenix, Devin Booker, what are you still doing? Come on, let's demand that trade. And then you have Sacramento. And I'll be honest with you, Sacramento may have just enough veterans in the room for them to still walk into around a 35-win season, so that's very respectable. And you're probably sitting there saying, well, why are you bragging about 35 wins? Bro, 35 wins as the third worst team in a conference would be crazy. And it's not that crazy to even make that claim, because just last year, the third worst team last year in the conference was a San Antonio Spurs team that won 34 games. So that's very realistic. That's very possible. It is very, very possible that this conference could have 12 teams that have a 500 record or better. 12. That's not common. I believe it only happened one time since they've expanded to 30 teams. And if that is the threshold that needs to be met to be a competent team in the Western Conference, without a doubt, it will be one of the best conferences that we have ever seen in NBA history. Now, to be fair, this is me praying and hoping for the best health for some of these players. Zion, big question mark. AD, question mark as well. Also, to be fair, Wemby has not played a full season of basketball. So I think it's fair if you want to sit there in the comment section and tell me, but Lo, what about all these health problems? That's all fair. That's fair. But taking these rosters as is, looking at who these players have on their team, I find it hilarious every time I go on the timeline and I see people claim that their team in the Western Conference is going to make a lot of noise, which they could, but making a lot of noise still might not be enough to be competitive in this Western Conference. You need to be yelling, screaming, stomping your feet, beating teams definitively to be on par with the top of the conference. 65 plus wins. from OKC. I think Houston can be a near 60-win team as well. And though Denver probably won't push themselves to that degree because how many older players they have on their roster, when they go in the postseason, they're going to be operating like they're a 60-win team as well. So yeah, this conference is going to be crazy. It's going to be a bloodbath, and I can't wait to see it. Even as a Laker fan, I'm pretty confident that my team isn't going to win a championship and more than likely another first-round exit, but it is what it is. I still love the fact that it's very, very competitive, and if anything, Adam Silver, at least at bare minimum, at least consider getting rid of conferences. Bro, I saw Adam Silver talking about how they're going to fly overseas to play other teams in other countries in playoff games, but y'all are telling me that they're not willing to get rid of conferences? Bro, get rid of them. There's no way that the West can look this loaded. This loaded. One healthy season away for them being potentially, legitimately, like 11 or 12 teams with a 500 record or better, while also looking at an Eastern Conference where they're struggling to win 500 games but still making the playoffs at ease. I'm sorry. I am tired of looking at that. If you're willing to open it up out the borders, bro, come on. Just remove the conferences and then we can really have talks about which team truly is better. But those are my thoughts. Crazy Western Conference we're going to see this upcoming season. If you missed my last video talking about the Eastern Conference, check it out over here somewhere. I'm pretty sure we'll have it on the screen. But if not, as always, hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.